In an unprecedented move that shook the global refugee policy landscape, the Trump administration in early 2025 took bold, unapologetic action by prioritizing the plight of a long-overlooked group, the Afrikaners of South Africa. This decision was not just a geopolitical calculation, it was a deeply moral stand against years of reverse discrimination, institutionalized marginalization, and violent persecution faced by a proud people in the very nation they helped to build from its colonial beginnings. For decades, Afrikaners, descendants of predominantly Dutch, French Huguenot, and German settlers, have been subjected to a slow-burning cultural and economic erasure in South Africa. Despite their historical contributions to South African statecraft, agriculture, and infrastructure, they have found themselves increasingly marginalized by policies cloaked in the language of justice but wielded with the blunt force of vengeance. President Trump's decision to fast-track the refugee applications of the Afrikaners marked a historic reversal of the West's usual indifference to white minorities facing persecution in post-colonial states. This was no ordinary immigration effort. While other groups like Congolese and Rohingya refugees languished in UN camps for years, the Afrikaners, especially those in farming communities under attack, were processed and approved for U.S. resettlement in a jaw-dropping 3 months. 3 months! That's faster than renewing a driver's license in some states. It was as if, for once, the bureaucratic machine remembered how to move when actual injustice rang through the wires. The Trump administration made it clear that this wasn't just about visas. This was about justice. And unlike the glacial pace of usual refugee programs, the U.S. government acted with a sense of urgency and dignity, befitting a group that has for too long been demonized by historical revisionism. Upon their arrival at Washington Dulles International Airport, these first 100 Afrikaner refugees were greeted not with suspicion or paperwork nightmares, but with the open arms of health and human services officials and the support of refugee organizations that, at last, could refocus their mission toward a group often derided or ignored by the global aid industry. Let's talk numbers. Afrikaners are a small group, roughly 2.7 million strong in South Africa, a nation of over 60 million people. They constitute just about 5% of the population but have faced a disproportionately brutal share of targeted farm attacks. Estimates place the death toll of white farmers post-1994 at over 3,000, a number that barely causes a ripple in the global press. Land seizures, legal under South Africa's 2024 Expropriation Act. Compensation, optional. The American left wails for the sanctity of property rights but falls eerily silent when Afrikaner families are driven off their farms at machete point. When President Trump issued his February 7 executive order, he didn't mince words. He called Afrikaners victims of unjust racial discrimination. Of course, the South African government fired back with its usual gaslighting, calling the charges factually inaccurate. Sure. And we suppose those armed home invasions were just surprise dinner parties? The administration's response was swift. Over 8,000 applications were screened in Pretoria, and 100 were selected for immediate resettlement. Who were they? Farmers, laborers, families, many of whom had been living under constant threat, their livelihoods destroyed, and their communities frayed by a toxic mix of racial animus and state neglect. In contrast to their grim existence back home, their reception in the U.S. included assistance with housing, groceries, clothing, hygiene supplies, and even prepaid phones. Basic things that suddenly meant dignity. Naturally, the same media outlets and refugee advocacy organizations that ignored the plight of Afrikaners for decades suddenly discovered their moral compass, but only to complain. The president of Haas, for instance, dared to object that this swift action somehow came at the expense of others. Not a peep, though, about the systemic campaign of violence against white farmers. Perhaps it's easier to moralize from behind a desk in Brooklyn than from behind barbed wire on a remote farm in Limpopo. Critics pointed to the hypocrisy of allowing in Afrikaners while freezing admissions from other regions. But this wasn't about exclusivity, this was about exceptionality. When the majority government in South Africa enacts laws to seize land from its own minority citizens without compensation, and the world shrugs, someone has to act. President Trump did. No apologies, no delay. It's not just political, it's personal. Many Afrikaners share cultural values rooted in Christianity, strong family ties, and a hard-working ethic that aligns well with rural and suburban American communities. They bring skills in agriculture, craftsmanship, and trades at a time when America is aching for such talents. They don't seek handouts, they seek peace, purpose, and the freedom to worship, work, and raise their children without fear of being punished for the color of their skin or the content of their ancestry. The legacy of this action cannot be overstated. For the first time in modern American history, a refugee program centered on racial equity for white victims was unapologetically implemented. This wasn't about identity politics. It was about recognizing overlooked suffering and taking bold action. It was about redefining compassion to include those whom the world loves to forget. And for the Afrikaners who arrived this week, it was about finding refuge, not in ideology, but in justice. To the newcomers we say, welcome. You are not alone. Your resilience will not be erased, your stories will not be buried, and your new chapter begins now, under the protection of a nation that, at least for this moment, chose to do the right thing. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to support this channel. Become a member today and help us bring more underreported stories like this to light. Hit the join button, show your support through a super thanks donation, and please let the ads play for at least 30 seconds. It helps us keep this channel alive and thriving. Your voice matters. Let it be heard.